factories, so they may help reinforcement to do their work efficiently, but can also be an obstacle to investigations. So we will have 4 panelists for this session. Olaf Kolkman from Internet Society, Stéphane Duguin, CEO of CyberPeace Institute, Maria Koomen, lead on the Open Governance Forum, and I will give a presentation proper before every panelist speak, and Timothee Rebours, CEO of SEALD. So you have the all the names and the title on the slide. I will now switch off the this presentation. We'll hand over to you, Gregory, the moderation of the session, so you can welcome the new guest and you can manage the meeting. So I will just do this now. Okay, now you are officially the host, and then I can focus on my work as the panelist. So why do I see you there? Okay, so I will see. So okay, everybody is here. So we have 4 panelists who are going to discuss about technology and policy, and also about investigations. What I want to say in the opening is we are coming close to the first anniversary of actually 2 important documents. One which was mentioned in the description of this session, which is this Council resolution on encryption by the Council, I mean the Council of the EU, this really executive branch body of the EU, and the resolution they disclosed a year ago in November, security through encryption and security despite encryption, released on 24th of November. And I will post the link to all of you, so in case you don't have it, it's a very important document. Actually, another document I will also post it on the chat is a document that was published by 7 countries, the so-called Five Eyes countries, I mean US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, but also joined by India and Japan. And this paper was called End-to-End Encryption and Public Safety, dated 11th of October of 2020, so basically a month before. And so we are now celebrating, if I could say, these 2 important documents, and think, okay, what progress has been made in the past year? There is growing tension, and we had some great questions from the participants earlier this afternoon on how to reconcile encryption with the need to investigate, especially some types of crimes, such as the sexual abuse against children, which are distributed online. So we are going to see this risk. What we wanted to discuss with you today is first, and Stéphane, we thought Stéphane would be the best to give us introduction on where are we in terms of security, or rather insecurity, of the current IT environment. I mean, the way we work and the way we use technology. So Stéphane Duguin, he's the CEO of the CyberPeace Institute, an NGO which has been established 2-3 years ago, based in Switzerland. Stéphane himself brings 2 decades of knowledge and experience in analyzing how technology can be weaponized against vulnerable communities. And this is exactly what we want to first to understand. So Stéphane, I will hand over to you so that you tell us where are we in terms of security. I mean, we hear that reinforcement and these, in particular, the Five Eyes nation plus Japan plus India had very big concerns about crimes against children, about terrorism, and how encryption was a threat to investigation. So without really necessarily touching specifically on encryption, we wanted to hear from you what's the big picture on the current level of insecurity we are in. So Stéphane, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. So I guess we need to wish to everyone a happy Global Encryption Day. So that's cool. It's nice to celebrate something. It's also nice to have a discussion where we don't have to explain why encryption is important. I guess it's not the topic here. And it's good to move away from that question. Encryption is good, encryption is bad, encryption is against security. I mean, that's not the concept here. The concept is what you're mentioning about something about threats. So let's build from this threat. What is the threat that is felt? What are we talking about exactly? And let's look at something that happened very recently with the Pegasus case and other similar cases where, in fact, the threat in this case is about the unregulated markets where private sector companies are thriving from the fact that there's absolutely no regulation when it comes to vulnerability investigation, vulnerability disclosure, responsible vulnerability disclosure, and oversight of democratic-based entities such as Parliament on law enforcement and judiciary and intelligence activities when it comes to exploitation of these vulnerabilities. So I think it's better to speak about this, because then if these vulnerabilities are going into the realm of encrypted services at rest, in transit, that's the second step of the story, but would like to focus on this. Today, the threat is that as there's no regulation, it's an escalation of capabilities that are developed, researched, and sold by the private sector. So we are now in a private sector-led insecurity, because what is happening is each and every dollar that is invested into this industry of researching vulnerabilities and to crack system is in fact a dollar that is invested into the cyber insecurity for everyone. And this is happening in a framework where these companies are deciding who gets to buy the services, who gets to use the services, that in the end, who gets to spy on who gets to monitor who gets to surveil who. And that's very wrong. So whatever we're discussing about here, at least that would be my 2 cents. I would like to put this as a basis, as how come that we have a system where if a researcher tomorrow wants to put up some capabilities to research vulnerability, in some countries, it can be very well against the law and risking prison, while at the same time, there's companies that are doing this for a business. It's totally opaque. They sell this to whoever, and we end up in massive human rights violation. And violation of what at the end of the day? Services that are encrypted in order to enforce monitoring and surveillance. If we solve this, if there's a real ambition to regulate these markets, then we can discuss on how law enforcement and judiciary under democratic oversight can have capabilities to do their job. But as long as we don't solve the first part, I think the second debate is going to be complicated. That's my 2 cents. I wanted to be short just to launch the conversation.
No, that's exactly the point. I think because for those of you on this call who would be, and there are a few of you who are more on the side of law enforcement and say, hey guys, we want to enable law enforcement to have the capability to investigate. You have to keep in mind this broader context, all this market of insecurity that Stéphane has mentioned. It's really important to keep the big picture and not be isolated into yes.
Can I just add one last comment, Jean-Christophe, just to build on this? It's also about what do we want to achieve when it comes to enforcing justice for victims of crime, and law enforcement, judiciary are part of a process that is seeking to repair for victims and for society. So if that's the objective, we need to look at the whole chain. And the whole chain is not only the technical capacity to monitor. The whole chain is the judicial capacity to prosecute. The whole chain is the international cooperation between states to extradite. The whole chain is exchange of evidence. That's the chain of investigation. So instead of focusing on one part of the chain that is felt, this doesn't work because this cannot be any monitoring, let's look at the rest, because I have numerous examples of cases, despite the situation and the low capacity of law enforcement and judiciary, where criminals were identified, where actors were identified, and then nothing happened. So it's not by surveilling more that we are going to solve that part of the process. So it's also important to have this in mind.
Yeah, I can see the expert speaking here, and no, absolutely agree. And it's and one example we will discuss. And Timothée, you said you wanted to elaborate on this. Is the Encryption case, which was really a major development in Europe. But that's for later when Timothée comes into this. but he will be speaking. I would like now to hand over to Olaf, Olaf Kolkman, who is principal at ISOC on Internet Technology, Policy and Advocacy. I mean, you have it in mind, you know it, but today is the first Global Encryption Day, part organized by the Global Encryption Coalition, which is has been established by a few leading NGOs, including ISOC. So if we are here today also because of all the good work done by ISOC, and ISOC play a leading role in the management of the Global Encryption Coalition. If you are not a member yet, please consider apply and join. It's free and it's really making a difference. So Olaf, you have yourself a long history in internet technology and policy matters, in particular with the IETF. I will be certainly unable to explain your contribution to these technical works, but I've been told, I understand, I mean, you have been a very key person in making the internet more secure and more transparent. So thank you for your contribution to the internet. Yeah, don't be shy. I heard big things of you, so we are very proud to have you today. Plus, you are modest, which is really the perfect. So Olaf, ISOC has a pretty strong stance in favor on encryption and against encryption interference, as we call it. So, but you're a better place to tell us. So why are you not a big fan of weakening of encryption and not really happy when there are laws to weaken encryption and enable more investigation?
Yeah, well, I'd like to focus a little bit on the weakening of encryption. Let's put that aside. There is no thing like half a weakening encryption. If you weaken encryption, you weaken it all. You should consider it to be thrown away with the garbage, so to speak. So let's put that aside. I actually would like to talk a little bit on and continue a little bit on where Stéphane started, which is actually pretty hard because Stéphane really pointed at two very important things. The fact that private entities get to decide who buys and spies. I think that's an incredibly good catchphrase. And that you have to focus on the whole chain. But let's look a little bit of what I call government hacking. So any instance in which government is involved with hacking into services to get access to content or to services or communication. Government is broad here, can be law enforcement, can also be military, can also be other branches of government. That's a little bit beside the point. What happens is that governments, when they do that, use exploits. They exploit bugs in computer software. And there is a bunch of security problems when you do that. We live in a global world that is highly interconnected. And when you have these exploits available, they can be stolen, they can be leaked, they can be replicated. That's very easy. There are plenty of examples where that's done. As Stéphane said, you can buy these exploits on the market if you want to use it as a government to enter into specific computers. But those private parties don't only sell to the good guys. If you have developed a exploit to target very specifically one party, you cannot guarantee that this exploit will be used against something else. Obviously, Stuxnet is a great example of that. The weaknesses, not patching computer bugs that leads to exploits in order to be able to use them, has the problem that the same bug can be discovered by other attackers. And there is the problem that you, of course, always have cross-boundary global environment in which you operate. So using exploits, using vulnerabilities to build exploits is not without problems. It's actually a very, very complicated space. If a government uses these type of bugs, then I believe that governments should have a set of principles by which they engage. And I also think that those same principles should be applied to the private market, or at least that is a starting point to start thinking about that. Serious, you have to be sure that you use these type of exploits when only for serious crimes, not for something lightly, not to, I won't give any examples there, but protect human life, counter imminent and significant risks to public safety, or prevent serious crimes. It should also be the last resort. If you have used all the other tools in that change set that Stéphane just mentioned, only then you should turn to these type of technologies. Of course, there should be a judicial process that governs all this. It should always be proportional. You shouldn't use hacking for in a non-proportional way. That is targeted and making sure that you hack only the people that you're after, so to speak. Risk mitigation. You should try to mitigate all the risks that you know of before you start using these type of tools. That's actually pretty difficult. And of course, procedural. You should put the rules in place in advance. You should have ex ante decisions and procedures around the use of these tools. I think that is a starting point whenever you discuss these type of things. And with that, I'm tempted to take a drink from this cup, but it was just handed to me by Robin Wilton, and I'm not quite sure if it's half of cyanide.
Thank you, Olaf. What you just say basically is, opening new way of thinking. I mean, in terms of coming from the facts, the reality that a way to investigate is to use exploit vulnerabilities, and then what you just said is, okay, maybe, I mean, this is a fact of life. This is the way today nation states operate for their benefit. We will elaborate on the Encryption case based on what you just said, and basically it may open a possibility to do something, but that would be that would enable law enforcement to operate while protect us or protect encryption from this everlasting debate of trying to weaken encryption. Because when you read the statements I've published, put the link on the chat, I mean, we don't hear what you just said. I mean, we don't have this kind of way of thinking. So that's something new to the table. I think that would be maybe so interesting to hear from Maria what you think. So Maria, you are the lead of the initiative Open Governance Network for Europe, which is a joint initiative of Democratic Society and Open Government Partnership. And your career has been to look at, of course, policies, but with a focus on democracy, good governance, transparency, accountability. So when you hear what you just heard from Olaf, and when you also, I mean, you have been writing and you published articles on also the balance between encryption and law enforcement, and you have followed very carefully all what happened in the past months. So what is your description, assessment of the current balance between encryption and law enforcement? And when you hear what I mean, it may be difficult to make some comment on the fly based on what Olaf said, but is there a way for you to bring more transparency and more accountability in all these issues? So Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's a very important day, marking Global Encryption Day, and I'm honored to be here with these speakers and with all of you participants. I thought I would give, essentially to zoom out and paint a bit more of where we stand on the encryption debate policy-wise in the European Union, factoring in what we've heard from Stéphane and Olaf, and perhaps also give some ideas for how to concretely, to create more of more open approaches to this policy, to this debate going forward. So in this context that you described, all three of you, Jean-Christophe, Stéphane, and Olaf, we know that the European Commission set out to create a Europe fit for the digital age, to address this, as Stéphane put it, this unregulated market, and to focus on strengthening the right to privacy and connectivity, improving the free flow of data, bolstering cybersecurity, all of which are built on encryption, strong encryption. But despite these conflicting interests, the Council pressed ahead with their proposed declaration, as you mentioned, Jean-Christophe, calling for a balance between security through encryption and security despite encryption, and calling on EU member states to join forces effectively with the tech industry to create this balance. On the other hand, these political calls were also have been met with louder and louder calls from across the spectrum of civil society to private sector, calling for a stronger encryption to become the norm. And as it's already been established, we don't need to hit the hammer over the head on that point in this particular call. So I'd like to challenge essentially where we stand and where this declaration puts us and where we stand looking forward. So I've challenged, so can the EU really create such a balance to provide security through and despite encryption without also undermining encryption? Well, also undermining privacy and security. So legally, no. And technically also no, not without effectively breaking or undermining encryption. So as there are arguably no legal or technical recipes for such a balance, the EU is left to create this balance through a political solution to this political question. And so where does that leave us? The encryption debate is further entrenched in debates around child sexual abuse material, around terrorism, and more broadly around criminality. We're still in this unregulated market of vulnerabilities and exploitation. Criminals are still struggling to hide their information just as much as governments are struggling to uncover it. So the Commission has folded this conversation around technical solutions into various formats around the annual EU Internet Forum, Ministerial on Terrorism. It's working on legislation that would allow tech companies to scan encrypted data and communications for criminal content, but at this point, we don't know what the limits are to that mandate. And they would also be obliging those companies to report and remove CSAM, that's child sexual abuse materials, encrypted or not. So much is still very much at stake for fundamental rights, for the rule of law, for democratic principles in Europe and globally. Privacy and human rights advocates have cautioned that against using politically charged issues like terrorism and child abuse to justify weakening encryption for law enforcement, as this rhetoric essentially narrows the debate and fuels misunderstanding in an already very complex debate. And it overshadows the larger role of encryption in the prevention of in our societies and markets. So considering this complexity of the debates around encryption and the essential role it plays for our markets, it's important that the EU takes next steps openly and in close cooperation, not only with the industry that it looks to jointly create solutions with, but also with civil society in order to ensure public access to and better understanding of and deliberation on the issues and their implications, as well as accountability. I don't know if
I have a question for you, Maria. That was raised in the chat during this afternoon, and I mean, when we talk about the most serious threats that should be, addressed despite encryption, CSAM, child sexual abuse material, is often quoted. Terrorism is the other. Some say this is different, should not be mixed. Some say you cannot, if you deal with one, you deal with the other. So because you deal with democracy, in general, so you're maybe the most neutral person among us on this topic. So what would be your assessment on mixing or not mixing these two topics? Do you think a democracy cannot deal with one without the other? Do you think they should separate the issues because they are so different? What would be your assessment on this ongoing combination of two topics which are very different?
If I understand the question correctly, it's can we deal democratically with both criminal issues and encryption?
No, should we deal with terrorism and CSAM, child sexual abuse material, in one discussion, so that we know exactly the scope of the discussion, or democracies would better deal with the two topics totally separately?
Interesting question. I think that by, I should say, encouraging the separation of the criminal debates from, say, encryption is not to undermine the gravity and the absolute urgency of the issues like child sexual abuse material, child sexual abuse in general. But there are, as the Commission has proposed, there are a number of different ways that our society and our governments need to deal with this problem from perhaps more causal perspectives, and focusing on things like prevention, awareness, support. Essentially, we need to build more of a robust infrastructure to prevent and deal with this invasive problem. In terms of terrorism, it's I think we can also take a very similar approach. Non-technical solutions are absolutely key to getting to root causes of terrorism, and also one of the issues that really sparked or pushed the encryption debate to a head in 2015-16, after the string of terror attacks across Europe, was lack of coordination across member states and clunky collaboration infrastructure. So I think that dealing with the need for better cooperation and data sharing is an urgent and also very, very reparable. It's a very tangible solution that can take priority over other technical solutions like weakening encryption.
And the last question before we hear from Timothée would be, so these two issues, child sexual abuse material and terrorism, are very difficult, also emotionally, topics, and not everybody is comfortable with this. And terrorism is really typically the ownership or owned by the government as an issue. How would you say that civil society embraces these topics? I mean, how do you think? I mean, in your role, for instance, in your initiative, are you comfortable by embracing these topics and then work on it, or do you think, well, because it's so emotional, because it's so sensitive, well, it's not easy for people to really ask for more transparency from the government or challenge the way government think about this? So do you think, there is still a lot more you can do at your level, for your organization similar to you?
So I think I'll answer this to say, of course, there's definitely more to do in responding to and helping solve these problems. I think what I would try to bring across is the need for not only comprehensive approaches, so not just focusing on technical solutions, and this will always require balances, but comprehensive solutions to problems that are shared across member states, that really require more deliberation and more public awareness, more education, and more robust legal infrastructure for better cooperation, better understanding, and better capabilities to deal with these problems at scale.
Yeah, no, thank you, Maria. I think this summarises well the situation. I mean, when we work on encryption, I mean, we feel we are kind of targeted on the technology and say, look, technology is bad actor, or the problem in which prevents to work on fighting these problems, and that's not very fair. And so what you say is really a kind of helping, useful for us, because we don't want to be stuck in a technical discussion. I'll move on to Timothée, who is the co-founder of Sealed, a French encryption company. And Timothée, you created the startup, co-founded it 5 years ago, just after you graduated from Polytechnique in France. And so you had this passion for cryptography. You are the troublemaker here. I mean, you are providing solutions which prevent potentially investigation of this type of crime. And so how do you respond? How do you cope with this situation and this kind of pressure you have? And also we agree that you would share your thoughts about Encrochat and this successful operation takedown of an encrypted communication system, which was very successful. Done by the French, the Dutch, and Europol earlier this year. So. Over to you as a technology provider, as the owner of a company in the field of encryption. So how do you respond to this?
Hi, thank you, Jean-Christophe. So yeah, first of all, I'm a strong advocate of strong encryption, and it's difficult enough to make an encryption solution that provides end-to-end encryption. If I was asked to introduce backdoors to help the law enforcement, it would make my life very difficult, and I wouldn't be able to guarantee that this backdoor is actually properly would actually be properly used. So I don't think the approach by weakening encryption is even feasible. When you look at it from all perspectives, from all angles, it's just not feasible. You can either think of weakening the algorithms and use weak algorithms, but it would be weak for anyone in the open. So any other attacker than the law enforcement would be able to peek into the data. If I were to create a kind of master key that would be shared between myself and the law enforcement in advance, it paints a target on anyone who holds the key. So this master key would be stolen, and any data encrypted with such a system would be leaked. So I think the debate around encryption is not the good debate. There will, in my opinion, never be a way to weaken encryption safely. I think that's the whole issue, and yet. I think that the law enforcement should have capabilities to investigate. So I think we should stop looking at the theory and look at a practical example. And the Encrochat case highlighted something that is actually going on in all law enforcement agencies across the world. They don't try to break encryption. They know it's quite unbreakable. What they do instead is they hack the device, the phone or the computer or the web service that will decrypt the data. And they will get into that and read the decrypted data where it's usually decrypted. So let's say if you want to get into, you want to read the messages in an encrypted instant messaging app, you won't try to knock on the door of this encrypted app to ask them for help or ask them for introducing a backdoor. Because if you do so, they will say probably no. And if they say yes, the people using the app will move to another app. So what the law enforcement did in EncroChat is that they hacked EncroChat. They got into the update server of EncroChat without EncroChat's knowledge, and they updated a contaminated version of EncroChat to anyone who's connected to this instant messaging app. And instantly, and at this instant, the law enforcement agencies had access to all the data that were decrypted on all the EncroChat phones. And they had access at this point in investigation to all the communications between a huge ring of drug traffickers. And they never weakened encryption to do so. What they did is that they developed a malware, and they used vulnerabilities to get into the update server and pushed the malware to all the phones that were connected to this. And I think the debate around encryption should be moved to, okay, how do we do that safely? How do we allow for our law enforcement agencies to hack safely and, like Olaf said, with the control of a judge, with a set of rules, so that we don't have adverse side effects like we've seen in the past. For example, when the American intelligence agencies got a leak of their internal database of their stash of 0 days of vulnerabilities, it was leaked and it triggered a massive wave of ransomware attack. The WannaCry and NotPetya wave of ransomware comes from a secret stash of 0 days that the NSA kept secret, or CIA, I'm not sure, and they got a leak. Anyone in the world knew that those vulnerabilities existed and tried to attack them. So we need to I think, investigate the idea of allowing the law enforcement, like they did for EncroChat, to hack into devices of people they investigate safely.
Thank you, Timothy. I think it's time now to hear back from Olaf and Stéphane on this, because basically what you say is the EncroChat case or takedown is an example of actually a good practice, if I could say, in terms of investigation, meaning they did not weaken encryption, but they basically take advantage of vulnerabilities. And really, to be crystal clear, I mean, I don't know how they found these vulnerabilities. I don't know whether they had the plan to disclose this vulnerability now. I mean, EncroChat was terminated, so that solves the issue. But Olaf, I mean, can you just to be crystal clear, I mean, tell us whether you do echo what Timothée just said in terms of, well, EncroChat's case is quite not a bad thing. I mean, maybe it requires more scrutiny or more oversight, or but did I understand well that you're actually on the same page as Timothée on this, or did I misunderstand? And you're on mute. Right,
the mute button again. Well, it sounds like if you look at that set of serious, last resort, judicial, proportional. I'm not quite sure about the risk mitigation. I would think the procedural part would be covered. But I haven't looked at the legalities of this. But on face value, this collaboration of two law enforcement agencies seemed to be one that hits all the criteria, and feels like it has been a good approach. The question, however, is indeed, where did that vulnerability come from? Was that sold on a dark market? Is that funding private companies that also sell their stuff to authoritarian and human rights abusing governments or regimes? Those type of questions all come into play. I think that in general, the approach to be creative, hack into services, and be targeted. Well, the question of target could be questioned here a little bit with the EncroChat case, because all of the applications of all the users of EncroChat were impacted, not only of the criminal users of EncroChat. And in fact, I do not know what the ratio is, but that could be a point of incompatibility, so to speak. But so to a high level, the answer was yes, this hits the points relatively well.
Interesting. I would like to have a question to Stéphane, because you protect, in your organization, you protect vulnerabilities, but you also cooperate well with industry. And if I was a vendor in one of these companies producing all these systems, and I see everybody kind of calling the police to own more vulnerabilities and use them, they will, okay, maybe with some scrutiny, but without a process to disclose these vulnerabilities so I can patch my systems, I think the vendors would maybe upset. I mean, how do you think industry would respond, Stéphane, on this new idea that we would have the police, I mean, well equipped with many vulnerabilities that they can use forever? So how do you think they will respond to this?
That's a good one. Is that a new idea first? I mean, the whole setup of judiciary and law enforcement under democratic scrutiny is about making sure that this equity in between the need for security and the protection of the public is always respected. And that you have independent authorities looking into the process of law enforcement in order to assess whether or not it made case. And that's the whole magic of the judicial chain. Law enforcement, independent judiciary, independent oversight by the parliament. And I would say to Maria's point before, the EU is the place where this is, I would say, working the best. So when this works, law enforcement is putting in place capabilities, technical, it can be a physical surveillance, other type of surveillance, whatever, but the scrutiny is giving the balance. And that's a simple rule. If a state is having enormous means to monitor its people, then the people needs to have enormous means to monitor what the state is doing. This is the only way for this to work. So if, sadly enough, some companies that today are building their fortune and business model on the fact that this system is broken. So because the system is broken, law enforcement, intelligence agencies, let's talk about someone else is going to be very pissed about this, and that's more intelligence agencies, competing in the dark market in order to be the one to buy a tool before another one, to be in capacity to hack. No, I don't know. Of course, they're striving from this. I would rather to have a system that is regulated with an oversight, and then all these companies would have to adapt. Because at the end of the day, the states are supposed to decide of the rules of the law and the rules of the trade and the rules of export and the rules of development. That's it's a bit of an old concept, but working one that is called democracy. There's something else I wanted to mention, because I saw that in the chat, and also something that Olaf mentioned before. That's very, very true. Law enforcement, in its vast majority, maybe not knowingly, but for sure practically, needs very strong encryption, is in urgent need of very strong encryption. I don't know if you followed, but last year there was some ransomware actors that targeted law enforcement. And why could they target law enforcement? Because the system were weak in terms of entry in the system, but more importantly, the data at rest were not encrypted. It was not a zero knowledge system. So when the data were gathered, because they were not encrypted, then suddenly a criminal group was in capacity to put a law enforcement under ransom. So trust me on that, law enforcement needs encryption. Also for the secure exchange of information in transits, law enforcement needs very secure communication because very sensitive data are exchanged. So, you know, it's also discussing with all communities about what is their need and what would happen if that basic need for encryption also for law enforcement would be undermined because there would be like, you know, backdoor, whatever ideas that I hope are not floating in the air anymore.
Olaf, you wanted to say something?
Yes, because I think I heard you ask something to Stéphane about what do companies think about governments using these vulnerabilities and discovering them and using them. And I think that there is another principle at play here, namely that governments that seriously work towards finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them for lawful or military means should have a vulnerability equities process. The Global Commission on Stability of Cyberspace has proposed a norm that reads, states should create procedural transparent frameworks to assess whether and when to disclose not publicly known vulnerabilities or flaws they are aware of in information systems and technologies. The default presumption should be in favor of disclosure. So that's the norm that the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace came up with. And I think that is a very good starting point for this discussion, because it is indeed the case that if these vulnerabilities are not reported, global security of our system deteriorates. The bugs that are in place can be refound again, and refound rates, the rates by which existing bugs are found by others already is estimated to be 10 to 30%, depending on the research that you look at. So
Maria,
getting rid of those is important.
Yeah, Maria, you raise your hand.
Yes, thank you. And actually, it's further to Olaf's point, to the idea of replacing the encryption backdoors debate with lawful hacking in the whole growing dark debate. It would of course open up a whole new can of worms, where we would still need to create a balance, and in this case between vulnerabilities disclosure on the one hand, data protection and surveillance, for example, on the other. And again, we would have privacy and security on either end of the scale. So, I mean, as with encryption, as Olaf warned, there is no such thing as a backdoor or a vulnerability for only the good guys. And even if there was, as the Pegasus scandal taught us, that not all governments are good, even within the European Union. And transparency and accountability need to be absolutely central to these debates going forward to ensure that governments can actually be held to account. Also, as the Pegasus scandal revealed, we need more protection from government surveillance, not less. Lawful hacking could have a chilling effect on those beyond criminals, civil society, journalists, government reformers or opposition leaders, contributing to more fear and self-censorship, attempting to silence those who hold their governments to account. And then as the EncroChat of many case revealed, government hacking is already happening, whether it's lawful or not. And so we're having this conversation in a policy vacuum that needs to be filled anyway, at least for proper safeguards to be in place. So I think going forward, robust, well, several robust legal frameworks need to be in place for lawful hacking, vulnerabilities, equities, as Olaf mentioned, surveillance, as already in the pipeline in the EU at the EU level in terms of AI. These are needed in order to enable law enforcement to continue their investigatory activities on the one hand, but also safeguard the security, privacy, and other fundamental rights and due process on the other. And so if we were to replace the backdoors debate with the lawful hacking debate, it should focus on establishing this robust framework that's also not only compatible, but also reinforces other existing frameworks like cybersecurity, data protection, and the AI, the future regulation on the AI, as I mentioned, with as much transparency as possible and in a democratic way. The EU should ensure this framework going forward.
I have a question to you, Maria, because Olaf said something which strike me, which he said that Europe was the best place to tackle this issue in a proper manner. So, and when I see the evolution of regulation, we see that Europe has started since the GDPR, has really embarked on a journey to really put privacy and safety, I would think, first. I mean, the discussions are on the DSA, Digital Services Act, Digital Marketing Act, the GDPR. All of this shows that Europe is now really developing a strong regulatory framework. And so an Encryption check takes place in Europe with strong oversight from the judiciary system. Certainly, I will agree with you that EU is not homogeneous. I mean, not all governments have the same approaches. So my question would you say, if we talk about lawful hacking, would you say Europe is indeed, you would agree with Olaf that Europe may not be the best, may not be ideal, but would be the best place on earth to develop a policy on this? Or do you think there are other regions or other countries in the world which has an even stronger, I think, policy in terms of checks and balance, rule of law, due process, what have you? I mean, would you say Europe is first, best in class, or second best in class, or among the best? How would you describe?
I would agree with Stéphane and Olaf that the EU is very well equipped and positioned to pave important ground in this space. And as we've seen with GDPR, for example, that can have ripple effects across other countries. I think considering also EU's historical emphasis on privacy, personal privacy, I think that it is not a far shot or not a far cry from where the EU currently stands. But there's a lot of ground to go. There's a lot of discrepancy between member states in terms of different priorities versus on security versus privacy. And as I mentioned earlier, also there's quite a large discrepancy in terms of capacity and capability. So lots of room to grow, but good position overall, and in a very, I think, good opportunity for leadership in this space.
Thank you, Maria. I see Timothée is raising his hand, so we're getting close to the end. So Timothée, you may have the final words, unless if you want to say final words, Stéphane and Olaf, just raise your hand so that we can give you the floor. Otherwise, Timothée, you may have the concluding words.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back on what Stéphane said earlier, is that today the vulnerability market is that is used by the lawful hacking. I don't necessarily like this term, but anyway, is privately led. We have private companies that currently sell the vulnerabilities on the market, who sell exploits. We don't know in the Encryption case, for example, if the vulnerabilities and exploits were built by the law enforcement agencies or bought to a private company. But another guideline I would add to this idea of moving the discussion from backdoor encryption backdoors to lawful hacking is we need to build a sovereign capability of finding those vulnerabilities. And this I know we could make a European team of security researchers that would, after a certain amount of time, disclose responsibly the vulnerabilities they find to the vendor or publicly, depending on what the responsible disclosure is in this case. And I think if my opinion on this topic is that if we were to have a team of European security researchers finding vulnerabilities, stash them for a short amount of time, and let the law enforcement use them for lawful hacking and disclose them afterwards, I think we have something that resemble a balance between security and law enforcement capabilities. I see Olaf wants to raise their hand, so I'll leave the floor to Olaf.
Yeah, this is an idea which is interesting and sort of sounds positive to my eyes, but to my ears actually. But I'm also having a bunch of really big questions around that make me a little bit skeptical. In essence, you're creating a sort of a public guns for hire hacking group, so to speak. And the question is, how will you compete with an unregulated market or with a regulated market? Even when you regulate the market, how do you get the talents that are needed to find those, well, let's say 5 or 6 bugs that you normally see in a year that can be used, and you're competing on an open market with that? How do you compete with police versus military use of these bugs? How do you make sure that this approach is global? That if you do this in one place, that you don't become a target in the same way that Vault 7 became a target and that the NSA became a target. So there are lots of questions, and I think we need at least another hour to discuss those, and perhaps even much more than a couple of hours to discuss all these questions and angles.
I'm very disappointed, Olaf. So you're not going to solve the problem today. I mean, I joined the panel because I thought there was a solution there. Okay.
Bummer.
No, but really, this is food for thought. And also, we don't have all the players in the room. I mean, we don't have the vendors. We don't have the law enforcement. They also have to, to give to say something. And you're right on the military versus police. I mean, that's also a big issue. So, but again, I mean, already between all of you on this panel, I mean, you have different views. You are coming from different backgrounds, and still, I mean, there is something new, fresh that I hear from you guys today. Which is something that I've not heard so far in other forums. So I think that was really a kind of for me kind of a groundbreaking type of discussion. So we'll certainly this will be publicly available on ISOC website. So those who are intrigued or interested or in favor of these new ideas, hopefully will reach out to us, or when we'll reach out to them for further discussion, they will. They're speaking openly with us on this topic. So thank you for this very, cooperative approach and trying to really solve the solutions. Thank you for contributors also and who care about the protection of children, and so we do. And I expect so we are going to have more calls, more meetings together. I mean, ISOC, Democratic Partnership, CyberPeace. Thank you for joining this difficult panel, because not everybody wanted to speak openly today on this panel. So your support and your openness is very much appreciated. And so there will be more to come next year. So thank you. And thank you to ISOC for managing the global encryption day. That was a fantastic initiative. Thank you, everybody. Bye for now. We talk soon.
Bye bye. See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.